Good morning. I'd like to start the quarterly commission business meeting on March 14th, 2024. I will turn it over to the chair, Representative Rajewski.
Thank you, Matt. And good afternoon, everyone. Uh, this is going to bring our business meeting, our March business meeting into order. We will start by recognizing the members who are in attendance. So I believe virtually we have myself as the chair. We have Vice Chair Judge Marsico, Representative Tim Bonner, Senator Langerholk, Senator Street, and Judge Craig Daly. Have I missed anyone who is attending virtually? I don't think so.
Chair, I'll just note that Judge McDermott had to step out and will be joining us remotely here momentarily.
Okay. All right. So we also will be joined by Judge McDermott remotely. And then I will rely on Matt to acknowledge the members who are here in person.
Great. We're joined by Professor Rago, Judge McLaughlin, DA Bible, and Attorney Balkovic. We're also joined by ex officio members Chairman Fox and Secretary Harry.
Excellent. Thank you. I do apologize for not being able to greet the new commission members in person. Unfortunately, I've come down with a bit of a stomach flu. Feeling okay, but I think for the sake of not having our new members be exposed, I had to be virtual today. So with that, I'll pass it to Matt to take us through the agenda. Thank you.
Okay, we'll do two quick items and then we'll move to an executive session shortly. But I will open it up to any public comment that anyone who's joined us may have. Okay, seeing none, I'll move to our first action item, which is needing a motion for the approval of the minutes from the December 7th, 2023 quarterly business meeting.
I'll motion to move.
Judge McLaughlin. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Professor Rago. Any questions, comments, or suggested edits to the minutes? Okay, hearing none. All in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
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 Any objections? Okay, hearing none, the motion passes. So I will turn it to Professor Mystic to discuss the upcoming executive session.
At the direction of the chair, the commission will be going into executive session for the purpose of discussing one litigation matter and two personnel employment matters. At the conclusion of that meeting, this regular session will then reconvene.
So
Okay.
Members online will need to utilize the other Zoom link that was provided, and we will probably convene in 2 or 3 minutes on that platform, and then we'll return to this Zoom link for the quarterly business meeting. I will turn it over to council to make a comment about the executive session.
The record should reflect that the commission was in executive session during which it discussed one litigation matter and two personnel employment matters.
Thank you. I will begin by formally recognizing two members of the commission. I think that we have had a number of months where we didn't have a full complement of newly appointed commission members, and I'm pleased to announce that we now have a full complement of commission members with terms expiring now September 30th, 2025. I'd like to welcome DA Bible, who was appointed by the Speaker of the House, and I'd also like to introduce Balkovic, appointed by the President. Give them the opportunity to say a few words if they care.
Thank you, Dr. Kleiman. I
appreciate the introduction. I'm very excited for this opportunity. I'm a newly elected DA, having only been in office for about 70 days. And but I am very excited to be a part of this commission. You know, hopefully I bring a lot of energy and maybe so but anyway, thank you, and I'll turn it over to Attorney Volkovic. Nailed it. All right.
Thank you very much. I echo those comments. I also look forward to meeting everyone and also working with the commission, and hopefully we make it a better situation for all. Thank you.
Thank you. And take this opportunity to also recognize a former commission member, DA Sunday. DA Sunday was on the commission from 2020 to 2024, and his term expired, and he was gracious to stay on until a new appointment was made. And our tradition, we have a plaque recognizing his service with the commission that we will make sure is sent to the DA. And I personally want to thank the DA for his contributions during the development of the 8th edition guidelines. He provided a lot of wisdom and guidance on defense gravity score, prior record score, and different policies, and was very thoughtful in consideration of the new guidelines. So thank you to DA Sunday for his service. I'd now like to turn it over to our ex officio agency units for any updates. I'll start with Chairman Fox.
We are continuing to work on the implementation, and we got an early data is on our guidelines that we are at 83% compliance with the guidelines. Very pleased with that. As a number, it really reflects what we're doing. So hats off to the commission for developing the guideline that really seems to be reflective of what the board's intent is in making parole decisions. But that's mostly been our focus over the last 6.
Thank you, Chairman. Secretary Harry.
Thank you. First, just want to thank Ryan again for coming over to the DOC and doing a presentation. It was well attended. Staff really appreciated the information. Parole board, attorneys, it was very helpful. So thank you. Just 2 quick things. Now that we're in the swing with JRI initiatives, especially post-COVID, we really took 2023 to do a lot of education of staff and assigning a JRA2 expert at each institution. And we really feel like we're in a good spot now with processing in a timely manner. We appreciated Brett's review of RSSP programs or cases. So we'll continue obviously to move forward with that. And then lastly, as I've been updating everybody on our Strong R, we are anticipating a rollout of our next phase, which will be classification on our custody levels. So that is anticipated to be in the summer of 2020. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And I really appreciate the partnership we have with both and look forward to continuing to work with both of you in coming months. The next item on the agenda is related to the selection and hiring of a deputy director for research and technology. With my promotion to executive director, it left a vacancy for the deputy director for research and technology. That search for that position is headed by the chair and the vice chair. They reviewed the candidates' applications, conducted interviews, and selected an individual for consideration by the full commission. The hiring of the executive director and the deputy directors require a majority vote of commission staff and approval of salary as well. The individual under consideration is Dr. Noah Painter Davis, who is currently a professor at the University of New Mexico. Dr. Painter Davis received his PhD from Penn State University in criminology and demography, and has a wealth of experience working in the criminal justice system and with a real expertise in sentencing and sentencing practices. So seeking a motion for consideration of his hiring of a salary set at $120,000 and the approval of moving expenses of up to but not to exceed $2,500.
Also move.
I'll second if you can hear me. This is Judge McDermott.
Great, thank you. I'll open it up to any questions or comments before we take a vote. Seeing or hearing none, I call a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any objections? Okay, the motion passes. Thank you. On the staffing side and Christy and Bobby from the Applications and Information Technology Unit and Education and Outreach will certainly say more, but we welcome 2 new staff members. The first is a business systems analyst, Matt Hanold. Really excited to have him join the team. This was a missing piece for Christy's team with the resignation of the former business analyst, and Christy's been really absorbing a lot of that work and some of her team as well. So it's great to have a designated person who's going to be assisting with the 8th edition guidelines. And then in the Education and Outreach Unit, we welcome a new specialist, Rachel Pierce. As you could see, we're doing a lot of development of materials for dissemination, and Rachel comes to us from the Federal Sentencing Commission with a wealth of experience in this area of training, especially as it relates to guidelines. Also with a real talent in the areas of web-based training tools. So we're really excited to welcome Rachel. Okay, moving down the agenda now to the governance and operations section. It mentions the operations manual update. Prior to the retirement of Executive Director Bergstrom, he worked tirelessly on developing materials to ensure the continuity of operations. And that included a manual for the executive unit, as well as staff manuals with standard operating procedures. We're still working on reviewing that draft and hope to finalize that and be able to share that material with staff, especially later this spring. So that's an update on that matter. And I want to thank Jadine especially for her work with Mark on that. And pretty voluminous. If you know Mark, it's very detail oriented and covers a lot of things that most of us would never have thought about. So thanks to Jadine for that. All right. Also in your commission materials on page 21 is our fiscal year 22-23 audit of our financial and related compliance procedures. This is conducted by an external firm, Boyer and Ritter. I believe this is the second audit in a 3-year cycle of audits with Boyer Ritter under a contract we have with them. In summary, they state that they did not find any deficiencies in internal controls and no instances of non-compliance. So I seek a motion accepting, where's my approval of the audit.
I'll make that motion.
Is that Judge Daly? Sorry.
That was me. Sorry. DA Bible.
Oh, thank you.
Judge McDermott will second.
All right. Any questions or comments about our audit? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes unanimously. Okay, 2 additional items left on my update, and then we'll turn it over to unit managers. The next is related to an item that can be found in the notebook materials on page 43. as has been discussed at prior commission meetings, Penn State University has been conducting a compensation and modernization initiative for the last several years, which requires developing new job classifications and new pay scales for Penn State employees. Commission staff are Penn State employees who work for the commission. And so we work under the rubric of the Human Resource Department at Penn State University and their recommendations. I was fortunate to work closely with the head of HR for liberal arts to talk about the implications that this would have for commission staffing and to determine appropriate salaries to ensure that there's equity among units and between levels of experiences and expertise. The implications of that compensation modernization initiative can be found on page 43. It's presented here as just the implications for the final quarter of, or the final third of the year, 4 months from March through the end of the fiscal year for the commission. So you could see the salary increases by unit and overall. I think it's worth noting that the executive unit, the deputies and myself as executive director are not part of this compensation modernization initiative. Our salaries are set by the commission. So out of a total overall impact was a little below 2% of the total salaries for the entire fiscal year. A total of roughly I'll say it precisely, $44,498 is the impact. So the commission would seek a motion to approve the salary changes for staff coming out of the compensation and modernization initiative. Professor
So
Rago,
I'll second.
are there any questions or comments regarding the motion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition?
Aye.
Okay, hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. And then the final piece that I will note is, and this was referenced at the December meeting, was this is of course budget season here. And so we have on page 44 and 45, you could see our request to the legislature for an appropriation of $3.6 million for general operations. This is an increase from our the current appropriation of about $2.55 million. The commission has not received an increase in that appropriation for about 5 years. And additional new responsibilities and roles, especially in the development of this new web-based application to support the 8th edition guidelines, is requiring additional resources. Some expected funding streams, particularly JRI2, did not deliver the amounts that we thought. So I'm working with Representative Krajewski and others on speaking with folks in the legislature to see if our increase can be approved by the legislature. I'm not sure, Representative Krajewski, if you'd like to add anything to that.
Yeah, just, I think, understanding the important work of the commission and the need to increase that line item. I have been working with Matt to set up some meetings with our Democratic caucus to, do what we can to make that request and have it be heard by leadership. So I know we've already have a line open with the Appropriations Committee. I actually just reached out to the Majority Leader Bradford today as well. So hopefully should be getting out in the books as well.
Great, thank you. And I will now turn it over to Ryan Myers to talk about administration outreach update, and Bobby as well.
Great. Thank you, Matt. I'd like to focus on 2 areas for this update and really reserve my time to turn it to Bobby when he talks about the education outreach unit and to provide information on all the efforts that they've had. Because I dominated the update earlier during the policy meeting, so I'll try to be sort of brief here. But the big focus for me is the first bullet that you see on the slide. And this is a yearly effort, an annual effort, as it says, of the commissions to work with counties for reporting of sentence information. And historically, that's been, focused on sentences, but over time, it's, broadened into reporting of resentences and the use, as we heard earlier from Brett and Jordan, the sentence risk assessment instrument. But I thought I'd give you a little bit of a timeline on a couple aspects of this annual project. One, the analysis of sentences reported to the commission and communicating that information to counties and working with them to report a previous year's sentences to the commission. I want to give you a timeline on staff's expectations to fulfill our annual reporting responsibilities when it comes to our publication of an annual report. And then lastly, just briefly remind the commission of our requirement around certification of compliance and highlight some areas that I've spoken about in past meetings where we still have some limitations on data. So shortly, just let me start with, at the beginning of the policy meeting for the members that are in person, we received fresh copies of the 2020-2021 annual report, which was the commission's sort of COVID edition. And we recently finalized that, and the Senate print and shop was kind enough to print a number of copies for us. For the members that are remote, for the legislative members, I've asked staff to deliver to your office here at the General Assembly at the Capitol. And for those other members, we'll mail them to you as well. And just as a reminder, this report has been posted on the commission's website, but it's nice to actually have a physical copy. So moving forward, we still have our 2022 annual report to complete, and we anticipate bringing a final version of that to the commission in June so that the commission can review that and that we can then proceed to post that on the commission's website and then work to have a select few number of copies made for members and staff. And then this sort of shifts gears, but it focuses in on the 2023 annual report. And what we'd like to do is target the end of the year, so sort of looking to the December meeting to have a final draft of the 2023 annual report. So that's available for the commission members and of course for the public. And then that would sort of get us, back on the timeline for our yearly reporting as we have done in the past. But here's the part of the effort that is important to recognize and really provides the information for us to complete an annual report is what we talk about as a reporting and verification process, our annual reporting and verification. And in short, what this consists of is every unit in the commission coming together to create information and analyze sentences that are reported and communicate that information to the counties, and then ask them to review and make sure that they're verifying the information is correct and that they're reporting any unreported information to us. And so I'll just give you a quick timeline and sort of the parties engaged in this. The research and data analysis unit works with an initial data set from AOPC to see what sentences were reported to AOPC that we're not seeing in our system. They provide that initial analysis to Christie's Application Information Technology Unit, who looks to see what information is in our SGS web system. If there's information there, what's the status of the case? Is it started but unreported? So we collect all that information, and then the Education Outreach Unit works through those files to do some spot checks to make sure that what we provide to a county is as accurate as we can get it. And then what we do is we send that file to the counties and we ask them to review and make sure that what was reported is correct. And if there's anything unreported, to please submit that to us. And so the timeline that we have here is that we will provide what I'll refer to as the preliminary analysis to counties. Our target is by April 1st, and I think we're well on our way to meet that. We'll give them the month of April to go through that reporting and verification process, in which staff in Bobby's unit and the Education Outreach Unit work directly with county users to make sure that we're providing technical assistance. And then we'll use May to do our final analysis. And then that really sets us up to have a couple of items that are really helpful. One is we have a final data set then for the 2023 annual report, and that'll get us started on working on that. The other part of this process is it helps to inform the final sub-bullet here of certification of compliance. And as I've talked about at great length in previous meetings, and we've been talking about for a number of years, is the commission's responsibility to certify compliance with the guidelines and the use of restrictive conditions of probation. And our initial effort from a staff perspective was to get counties up to full reporting of sentences. And I won't go into great detail, but we weren't meeting a really high threshold for full reporting of sentences until a couple of years ago. And it took a lot of effort of the Education Outreach Unit to work with counties. And we have now seen really high reporting from all of our counties, and that's a really positive part. And out of this reporting and verification, we can create an analysis to say, like, what's the percent reported for a county in a given year? And so counties are really eager to receive that information from us come spring and summer. The other areas, though, that I wanted to mention, at least from certification of compliance, is that while we have done a lot of work and made a lot of strides in the sentencing side of things, where we still have some limitations in data to move towards full certification is the reporting of resentence information. So revocations of probation and resentencing. And I've worked with Brett, and we'll be looking at some of the data a little bit more closely, but I don't want to put a percentage on it, but we're not anywhere near where we need to be at this point for determining if counties are reporting resentences. And just as an example, not any one county specifically, but when we look into SGS Web for resentencings, there are counties that have 0 reported. So we know that that's not accurate. And so we have a lot of work to do to make sure these counties are reporting it. And so this effort that we're going through now and what we will be doing in April with counties is another opportunity for us to reiterate to counties the importance of reporting that. And then the final thing that I wanted to mention, and another limitation that we're working through, was the discussion around risk assessment earlier. You know, as Brett and Jordan and Matt discussed, there's some areas where we're just a little unsure of, you know, the use of risk assessment, how often it's being used, and so forth. The way in which it's being used. And so we have some efforts to work there. And I think for Bobby's unit, from an education standpoint, I believe this was mentioned, is making sure counties are generating guideline forms early in the process, even if they will end up being negotiated pleas. And so we've worked with a lot of district attorneys' offices to take on responsibility in generating guidelines because they're just particularly well situated to know the cases coming through and accessing that information earlier, which would then, you know, trigger the risk assessment and have that analysis or that recommendation earlier in the process for the parties and subsequently for the court. So there's a lot of effort around this annual reporting and verification process, and it feeds a number of projects for the commission. I've only highlighted 2 in the annual report and our certification of compliance. But, you know, Matt could talk to it more if he'd like to, but all of this information is really important to just the general research of the commission and also fulfilling, you know, data requests from counties and from outside entities. Good with that? The second thing that I'll mention here on this slide, and then I will turn it over to Bobby to give the Education Outreach Unit update. Just wanted to remind the commission that we have various educational partnerships. In the past, I've talked about Villanova and Penn State and Duquesne and Lincoln University. But I just wanted to highlight 2 right now that are particularly timely. Last month in February, we completed the first session of the Villanova Sentencing Workshop, which is an annual workshop that the commission collaborates with Villanova Law School and AOPC on. Next week, we will complete the second and final session of the workshop in Villanova with Professor Chanenson from Villanova Law. And I think we're in our, 22nd or 23rd year of the Villanova workshop. So it's a really special thing. And then the second bullet you see there is just about Penn State University. Clearly, we're affiliated with the university, as we all know. One of the parts of the MOU is that staff of the commission instruct a sentencing course or an undergraduate course. It just so happens to be in sentencing, believe it or not, in the fall and the spring of each year. And so we are in the middle of the spring semester at Penn State and instructing the spring 2024 sentencing course for undergraduates at Penn State. And I'll just note that this is a 400 level course at the undergraduate level, so it's a little bit more rigorous for the students. And we have seen over time students coming out of that course and working with the commission either through an internship or actually as early part of their graduate degree. So it's been a nice little conduit to try to find students for work for the commission. So with that, I'll turn it over to Bobby. He can talk about the 8th edition implementation efforts that I didn't talk about and anything else from the education outreach unit.
All right. Thank you, Ryan. I'm going to go kind of out of sequence, just kind of logically framing it in my mind. First, I wanted to welcome Rachel Pierce, as Matt had mentioned earlier. We had the fortune of adding her to our team last Monday. So it was nice for her to be able to start before this commission meeting so that we can officially welcome her. As Matt had indicated, she comes to us with a previous career from the U.S. Sentencing Commission. She has a very extensive experience in our space and really is going to, I think, add some value to what we're hoping to accomplish, particularly related to some policy-oriented videos, content for individuals. So looking forward to her contributions to our unit. Second is the Education and Outreach Committee. So as Matt indicated in the policy meeting, we now have members. So I will be reaching out to those individuals to set up a committee meeting because, as you can appreciate, we've got a lot of stuff that we're working on, and we'd really like some feedback from the members of that committee to help us frame out what we'd like to put together over the next couple months. So looking to do that in the next couple of weeks, get that scheduled. Related to legislative and case law tracking, Maria, our policy specialist, does a great job of tracking all that information. You can find some of the highlights on page 5 of the supplemental materials. Ryan did highlight some of that. We had a discussion about the act in Senate, and so all those materials are there as well. Where I wanted to spend the bulk of my time, though, is really to talk about where we've been over the last couple months and where we're going for the rest of this year. And so first, Ryan gave a nice overview of our interactions with counties and the information that helped frame our understanding of the early efforts within the counties. And so I think it's really important to first thank the unit, as Ryan did, for their efforts. From September through the end of January, we broke out our approach into phases. So that was phase 1 of our educational efforts. Over that time, we were able to connect with 63 sessions related to 8th edition. So those are the 3-hour sessions that we did primarily in counties. There were some counties that requested virtual sessions. And we had just shy of 200 hours of content in that realm. And we had the pleasure of interacting with almost 2,500 people. So a lot of talking, a lot of engagement, and really a lot of good feedback from the people that we were able to meet. Of those attendees, I heard from the AOPC that 112 members of the bench were also in attendance in those sessions. So really good engagement from the judges across Pennsylvania as well. So that's where we were. Where are we going? So we started at the end of January, our second phase of educational programming. We've reverted back to Zoom as our primary offering. And really, we had 3 primary sessions for phase 2. The first, as you can appreciate, is a prior record score workshop. And so that's really targeted in on prior record score. The second is offense gravity score and enhancement related. And then our third one relates to the updates in SGS Web incorporating 8th edition. Each of those workshops, we did not offer any CLE credits, really because we wanted to really focus more in on that interaction with users and try to help them get acclimated with the content. So we've had those sessions. I believe we had 7 of the OGS, 7 of the prior record score, and by the end of this month, we'll have 2 of the SGS Web related sessions. We're building out our calendar for the next quarter. So we've kind of taken a shorter term approach with how we're building the schedule and really trying to be as responsive as possible to users. So we have finalized our April through June offerings. And so we'll again offer the prior record score workshop, OGS workshop, SGS. And as we get to the end of this quarter, we're also looking to incorporate two new courses. The first is a introduction to sentencing in Pennsylvania. So previous to the 8th edition, we did a sentencing fundamentals, sentencing guideline fundamentals. We're retooling that sentencing introduction course. So we'll have that in the later portion of this next quarter. And so really looking at those people that are coming into the system, giving them some fundamental knowledge that will be helpful to them in their roles. And then what we're also building out, which I'm really excited for, is an advanced prior record score workshop. So one of the big pieces of feedback we've had from practitioners as we were engaging in the first phase of programming was we really want more exposure to prior record score since that's such a substantive change. And so what we're doing is building out more complex cases, thinking, those instances where lapsing is going to apply and those other nuances, those more involved criminal histories where we would give out the materials in advance. They would come prepared to discuss the cases that the histories we've assigned people and talk through the process of figuring out that prior record score. So really excited for that. And when we're looking at an offering of courses, as Matt and Ryan had highlighted earlier, with the typical progression of cases, as we get through May, June, that's when we're going to really see a lot more of 8th edition cases coming through. So from a timeliness perspective, we really think offering it at this time is going to be really relevant for the users. So looking forward to those courses as we build those out. Some other highlights just in terms of what we did in 2023, since, this is our first meeting, 2024. Overall, we had 650 help desk requests, 320 user role requests, and 338 sentencing and guideline inquiries from individuals. So pretty busy year, 2023. The first part of 2024 for January and February, we have 112 user role requests and 92 inquiries for sentencing guideline related requests. So starting off the year, I think a pretty good amount of work as well. Not surprising with, the new 8th edition guidelines that we have going on. And then from a right to know request, 2023, we had 86 inmate inquiries and 9 right to knows. And for the first part of January, February 2024, we've had 10 inmate related requests. So also starting out on a good volume there. Those are the highlights that I have. I don't know if there are any questions that any of the members have related to what we're offering. If there are any pieces of feedback that you have in terms of you see gaps. The other thing I didn't mention, but I think it's important to note, we are working to build out that short video policy content in the next quarter as well. So that's one of our priorities with phase 2. But if there are any questions, comments, happy to answer those. If not, I'll turn it back.
Great. Thank you, Bobby. On the research and technology side for research partnerships, just very quickly, we are gearing up for fall of 2024 with our staffing. And what that means is we're identifying graduate students who will work at the commission. We typically have 2 graduate students. We'll most likely have 1 from the criminology department who's been with the commission now for 3 years, seeking out a second student to work with us. And we have also contracted or received approval for a new postdoc who hopefully will be finishing his PhD this spring. And he's at Cambridge University in England and will be joining us at the commission. He has a background in economics and in criminology. And obviously at Cambridge, he's a pretty bright young man. So we're really looking forward to having him join us. And those are through the MOU with Penn State, through the Criminal Justice Research Center, which is part of the criminology and sociology department at Penn State University. So we're really excited about that possibility, as well as a potential for a summer intern from the Masters of Public Policy program, which we've hosted for probably the last 5 years We continue, Brett and I, to work with a current MPP student on a capstone project where he's looking at the ratio of minimum to maximum sentences. So for example, why someone would receive 2 to 10 and trying to understand that in that space. So more to come on that, but with that, I will turn it over to Christy for her update on the application information technology.
Thanks, Matt. So as Matt mentioned earlier in the meeting, we did have an open position in the Applications and Information Technology unit, which has been filled. We welcomed Matt Hanold in February as a business systems analyst. He comes to us from Penn State. He was working for the Office of Physical Plant as a business analyst. And he's already pretty much jumped right in and has been helping clarify business requirements and the application design for the SGS Web NextGen project. As far as the status of the NextGen project, I provided an overview of that project this morning, so I'll keep this pretty brief. As I mentioned in the policy meeting, we are currently running about 3 months behind the original schedule. The vendor that we are working with, Infomatrix, did recently add an additional developer to the project to help keep it from getting further behind. He just started this past week. The project itself is organized around a series of 16 two-week development sprint cycles, and we are currently wrapping up Sprint 8, which included functionality to create offenses, apply sentencing factors and enhancements in order to calculate the offense gravity score. We've also been working on functionality to automate the prior record score by importing criminal history information from AOPC, and then using those two factors, the offense gravity score and the prior record score, to generate the guidelines. So that's kind of like what we're currently working on. And then the last thing that I'll mention about the NextGen project, as we announced earlier, we did decide on a new name for the application. So it's going to be called the Commission on Sentencing Records Exchange, or CASER as the abbreviation. Staff did continue to support and maintain the legacy SGS Web application. So the most significant work that we did was back in January, we deployed the changes that were needed to support the 8th edition sentencing guidelines and resentencing guidelines. So far, we did find a few issues with those. So we did have to, deploy some fixes, but so far it's been going well. And then as far as some additional efforts, staff worked with Penn State liberal arts IT staff to replace a server that wasn't under warranty anymore and was experiencing some disk failures. And we also coordinated with the Legislative Data Processing Center to establish a backup repository for key commission files. So lastly, I'll report that as of January 31st, 112,000 sentences have been submitted with 2023 dates of sentences, and a little over 5,000 sentences have been reported with 2024 dates of sentence. And if you want to see that full report, it is included in the supplemental materials, but I did not note which page it's on, so I cannot provide that. That's all I have, so I'll turn it back over to Matt. Hopefully that was brief enough.
Perfect. Thank you. I have promised Professor Mystic that we would be done before 1. So it's all hanging on Brett Miller's shoulders, who I'll turn it to now. But we do have one action item in his reporting out.
Thanks, Matt. I'll try to be brief. I've got 18 minutes. I'll see if I can make it. Ryan, could you advance the slide? So as we continue to work through the implementation of the 8th edition guidelines, we're about 3 months in now, and we're anxiously awaiting a chance to get to look at some of the data and see how some of these changes are looking in practice, especially PRS, the new OGS scores. But because the guidelines only apply to offenses committed on or after January 1st, 2024, at this point, we don't have a whole lot of data to report out on. In fact, it may be a few more of these quarterly meetings before we do have any substantial data to report out on. Just to sort of highlight that fact and what the pace of that ramp up might look like. We've produced a graphic here that's sort of a simulation of how long it might take to build up sentences based on the date of commission of an offense. We went back to our sentencing data from 2017. We looked at the dates of offense of all sentences starting at 2017, January 1st, and moving forward. And so what we saw in those first couple of months, January, February, March, the proportion of sentences that had occurred after January 1st of that year was very, very low, below 10%. And that sort of lines up with what we're seeing so far in SGS Web. In fact, I think in January, we had something like a dozen sentences reported to SGS Web for the 8th edition guidelines. So not a lot to analyze there in terms of data. As you continue going down the months, it looks like as we get into the summer months, and then especially as we get into the fall, that's when we're going to start to see the 8th edition sentences probably work up to being the majority of cases that are sentenced. So I would imagine, assuming that the rate of cases is similar to what we saw back in 2017 for this simulation, I would assume that maybe by the late fall, by winter, then we can have some real data, some real numbers to be able to look at the data and have some actual takeaways that we can present to the commission and have a feel for how some of these changes are working. All right, next slide, Ryan. Let me get that next slide, Ryan. There we go. Earlier this morning at the policy meeting, we gave an overview of the risk assessment and how that implementation has been going. Again, some of the takeaways are, number one, that the model itself seems to be working well. We're getting the same distribution of risk scores as we expected. We're getting the same categorizations in terms of low, typical, and high risk. Those proportions are what we expected. So that's all good news. The module seems to be working well in terms of collecting data from AOPC and generating those scores. The part we do have some questions on, and which we discussed, was that we just can't quite tell if those assessments are having an impact in terms of the courts going out and getting that additional information in those high risk and low risk cases. So we're going to continue to think about different ways that we might be able to collect that information, and just to feel like we have a better visibility of what's really happening there at the county levels. One other thing I wanted to highlight was back in January, some of the staff from the Research and Analysis Unit took a visit to Harrisburg and spent some time meeting with DOC staff and parole board staff. And especially I want to thank the DOC, Jim Stover at DOC put together this meeting for us. And we ended up meeting with more than 20 different staff members at DOC from several different units, and got to talk to them about some of the data exchanges that we have for a lot of our evaluations. We provide data to their staff for some of their work. But also we got to spend a lot of time just learning more about a lot of the processes and programs that we spend a lot of time studying. So we got to spend a lot of time talking about state drug treatment program and the other JRI programs and how those are working up to this point. We got to talk to the veterans coordinator, learn more about the veteran service units at DOC, and a lot of that information will be helpful for us as we move on to working on Senate Resolution 196. And it was just a great chance just to reform some of those connections. I think it was our first visit to DOC headquarters since before COVID. So just a nice chance to keep those connections fresh and meet some of our counterparts at DOC. And then also we were able to pop over to the parole board offices and meet with board secretary Carpenter and she sort of gave us a demo of how the parole guidelines are operating and some of the new IT tools that they've been developing over there to use the guidelines. Matt mentioned earlier Senate Resolution 196, which is focused on veterans and their involvement with the courts and the criminal justice system. This resolution hasn't passed yet, but we have started some initial work just so that we can be prepared on our end if the resolution does pass. So a lot of the work we've done up to this point has sort of been research on PTSD and traumatic brain injury and some of these different diagnoses. We've been looking at different tools and assessments that can be used to make these diagnoses, and then looking on the treatment side at different programs that are available and can be implemented, and trying to find information on effectiveness, cost information to try to get an idea of the resources that might be required if we were to make a recommendation to add some assessments or diagnostic tools at some phase of the criminal justice process. So we've been doing just sort of a lot of background research on those elements, and then hoping that if this resolution passes, we'll be able to lean on some of our partnerships with other agencies and hopefully develop a closer partnership with the Department of Veterans Affairs, and, as I said, lean on them as a source of information and hopefully data, because we have access to a lot of criminal justice and court data, but what we don't have is the ability to seek out any of this information in terms of a medical diagnosis, and we're not going to get that type of data. So we're going to have to rely on some of our partners to help us out in some of those areas. Another project we have currently ongoing internally with our staff is an analysis of short confinement sentences, and especially short prison sentences. So mostly looking at prison sentences with a minimum of 1 year or less, and then comparing those to comparable offenders who are serving county jail sentences, and trying to look at the trade-off between those two, and if we can find any connections or any areas where it might make sense to divert some of those state inmates to the county side, and maybe reduce some of the resource load required, maybe give them access to more programs in the community without sacrificing public safety. So that work is ongoing. We've collected criminal history information to be able to conduct recidivism analysis, and hopefully we'll continue to have more updates on that project, probably when we come back in June. Last time at the December meeting, I gave an update on our correctional population simulation models. So we're actually required in our enabling legislation to develop these models. It specifies that they need to be simulation models. And really the key benefit of that is that it gives you a lot of flexibility to play around with things like changing guidelines. So if we wanted to change the upper and lower bounds of a certain cell on the guideline matrix, the simulation model gives you flexibility that you can change those rules and get a pretty good idea of how sentencing practices might respond to those types of changes. So we continue to work on those models. Adding a lot of what we're trying to do is add a lot of flexibility and improve the data reporting that comes out of the models, just to make them more useful, more feasible to run, and maybe a little more responsive. And then my last bullet, we continue to get a lot of custom data requests and requests for custom reports. We see a lot of different categories of these requests. During the academic year, we see an uptick in requests from universities and professors. During budget season, we see an uptick from the General Assembly. And sort of one new category that we've been seeing more of for maybe the last 9 months or the last year is that I've been getting more and more requests from private attorneys, and they'll call me up and ask if I can provide data for a specific case that's ongoing that they're working on. So depending on the request, a lot of times we can provide information to them related to sentences of similar offenses. But it is sort of a different category than what we were typically used to, which was these academic or government requests. So oftentimes we do charge a fee for these types of requests. And I think the last time we updated our cost estimates for these requests was 10 years ago or more. So what we had been charging was, I believe, $6.50 for every 15 minutes of labor time to produce these custom reports. And so we felt that that rate, and especially given the fact that we're getting more and more of these requests, we felt it might be time to increase the rate for those requests. So we do have one action item, which is to update that request form for custom sentencing data reports that would increase that fee from $6.50 per quarter hour to $10 per quarter hour. So still a pretty reasonable rate. Most of these requests are, it's a matter of 4 hours, 8 hours of work. So these are not hugely costly reports, but we did want to make that modest increase to that fee.
Thanks, Brett. So we have a motion to consider for the modification to the commission's custom order form.
Motion.
Judge McDermott, thank you. Professor Rago, thank you. Any questions or comments to Brett about the data collection form? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, the motion passes. Thank you.
All right, and I think that was all I had for my updates. So can send it back to Matt.
Great. I'm going to turn it over to Ryan for a very quick policy update, and then I'll have a few announcements to close out the meeting.
Thank you, Matt. As you'll see on the slide here, there's a few notations, and I'll just hit them quickly for you. But back in, I think, January, the final version of the 8th edition text of the guidelines was published in the Pennsylvania Code. And through the process, there was an error recognized in the original publication in the Pennsylvania Bulletin. And the Bulletin was made aware of that error. It was the misplacement of a visual dot on a table, but they had corrected the error, and that was published last week, I believe. You can see the citation there. Staff have made an update and a notation on reference materials available on the website so that individuals know that that information is available in the bulletin. It'll eventually be updated in the Pennsylvania Code in their June edition. Just to make you all aware of that, and that again, that information is available to practitioners on the website. One thing that I spoke about earlier during the policy meeting and the updates on just the information that staff have provided relative to the 8th edition, I had mentioned about new or modified offenses, as a result of the General Assembly. And in December of last year, a number of bills were passed and enacted. And this is this recently enacted legislation that I have noted on the slide. Included in your commission supplemental document, pages 75 through 89 are summaries of recently enacted legislation. And I wanted to highlight, there's actually 6 acts in the documents, but I just wanted to highlight 4 because they directly impact the commission either through offenses or through, as our chair, Representative Krajewski, mentioned earlier, Senate Bill, I think it was 893, I might be mistaken, but regardless, Act 44 here, I think, on the screen. So we wanted to provide you summary information. A member in Bobby's unit, in the Education Outreach Unit, Maria, tracks legislation and then provides these summary documentations for us internally and then also for commission members so that we can follow this along. And in short, what I'll note is that Acts 39, 41, and 42, they are let me get my reference here real quick. There's actual changes, it's either creating new offenses or modifying existing offenses. And this is where I had previously talked about the application of the omnibus policy. So what we have provided commission members is a listing of each one of those acts, areas that would impact the offenses that are either published in the guidelines or would modify existing offenses or add new offenses altogether. And we always talk about this as our recently enacted legislation list, and posted on the website, you would see a listing of offenses with those related omnibus offense gravity scores. This is a common practice of the commission and staff of the commission to sort of fill the gap in reference materials between the adoption of a guideline or an amendment to the guidelines and then a future amendment or adoption of guidelines. And then the last thing I'll note on this is that anytime a new or modified offense occurs, not only are we providing this information on the website, but the Education Outreach Unit works with Christie's unit to make sure that SGS Web is updated. So with that being said, the information's there and it's available for your review. Matt and Brett referenced the Senate resolution. We just wanted to make sure you understood that that also was provided in your materials. And then the final thing that you see on the slide is a reminder. This was discussed back in the December meeting, but we know we have new members. Both House Resolution 263 and 269, while they haven't passed yet, would potentially require the commission to engage in the review of the geez, I'm blanking on it now, crimes code. Thank you. And so we're just tracking that along, but that information is available in your supplemental notebook packet as well. So with that being said, I'll turn it back to the executive director.
Great. Thanks, Ryan. Just two announcements. The first is that the commission has had historical engagement with a national organization called the National Association of Sentencing Commissions. I currently serve as the vice president of this group called NASC, and they have an annual conference this year. It's August 6th and 8th in Raleigh, North Carolina. And historically, we have invited and we continue to invite commission members to attend if they are interested in attending the conference. I certainly could disseminate information to anybody who's interested. There is a website with conference information. Again, National Association of Sentencing Commissions. This is the second celebration of the 30th year of NASC as a new. Somehow these smaller organizations, they actually don't know the date that they started. So it's either 1993 or 1994. So this is part 2 of the 30th anniversary celebration with a theme called Sentencing Then and Now, the Role of Commissions in Sentencing Reforms. Again, over time, commission staff have served on panels, presented at the conference. Currently, Ryan and Bobby will be talking about some of the outreach efforts that are going on, hoping to engage other states, maybe Washington, to be on a panel about their new guidelines and what they're doing. And Christy will be talking about the next gen, this web-based development, and also including hopefully Maryland and maybe the District of Columbia. And we're reviewing the agenda right now for the conference. And a meeting earlier this week was an opportunity, hopefully, for Representative Krajewski to present with folks from the Washington, D.C. Sentencing Commission about their community engagement efforts and in that space. So really excited that Representative Krajewski will hopefully be on a panel. But again, if members are interested in attending, please let me know and we can disseminate information. Judge McDermott and Professor Rago attended last year. The previous year, Representative Krajewski attended. Also, Judge Bernstein attended as well last year. Okay. The last item is the next meeting, which will be June 5th and 6th here again in Harrisburg. So a Wednesday dinner meeting followed by on the 6th of June, a policy and business meeting. Information will be shared, of course, in the coming months regarding that meeting. And then as the final announcement, unit managers will begin reaching out for these subcommittees to see if there's a reason to convene and identify opportunities for additional engagement with commission members. So with that, I will turn it back to Representative Krajewski to see if there are any other comments or questions before we convene.
Thank you, Matt. And thank you to you and all of the staff for a thorough presentation of all of the things before the commission. Do any of the commission members have any thoughts or questions before we adjourn for today? Okay, going once, going twice. Okay, I think we're in the clear. Thank you, everyone. This commission meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Matt. Thanks all. Enjoy the rest of your day.